Best Irish music on irishradio.org with Jerry Byrne.
Irish Radio, I'm Jerry Byrne. Since the onset of COVID and everything else, I've been speaking to many of the great and the good from Irish entertainment, Irish personalities, community representatives. Now, the next gentleman I'm speaking to is a man who's been a public figure in Ireland for many, many, many moons, regarded as the priest of the Irish country music scene, and a priest who also sort of works every day, but incredibly well known, has written books, numerous articles in the press, and I'm delighted to say hello to him, the one and only Fr Brian Darcy. Fr Brian, how are you?
I'm great, Jerry. Nice to talk again. How are you keeping yourself?
Not too bad at all. Not too bad. It's pretty strange times, you'll have to admit.
Oh, very. As we talk, it's a very strange night now, and lockdowns in various places across the islands. And I'm sure before too long, all the British Isles will be in lockdown. It seems to me, because whatever happened is coming up to Christmas. We just lost the plot a little bit and let down our guard. And once you let down our guard with this virus, I'm afraid it always wins. So please God, I know this. I think the idea that there is a vaccine coming maybe made people relax too quickly, and I think we should try to just try and keep a little big control of it for a long time, because the vaccine is not going to be successful for at least 6 months, really, in that way. So it's going to be a long time. And if we get that 6 months, then we will have something to look forward to. But people could needlessly die unless we take it seriously.
Indeed so. Indeed so. How very, very, very true. Listen, you became very well known, involved in the music scene, because you used to go out, when you were a young man, as a young priest, you used to go out to the dances.
Indeed I do, and if there were dances around still, I'd still go out to them, and I'm far from a young man now. I've always, found that going to the dances, just to talk to the people dancing, and I never danced in my life, actually, but I just love listening to the music and being with the band people. And from the very beginning, I'm 51 years ordained now this year, and from the very beginning, the band people in 1969-70, they took me as their chaplain. I was never appointed the chaplain. I never put myself forward as a chaplain, but they always referred to me as their chaplain, because I was with them and around with them, knew what they were like. In the beginning, I used to marry them, and then I baptized their children, and then I married their children, and sadly now I spend a bit of time burying them. So it has been a full circle, and they've been lovely people and great people to work with.
Indeed so, and you're known by everybody in the sort of the music scene. It's truly incredible. Now, on as regards the priesthood, it wasn't back when you started going to the dances and all that. At that stage, it really wasn't that many priests who would even venture to do that, and many priests actually at that time sort of frowned on this whole bands and dancing and things like that.
In 1970 was the first year I was ordained. At the end of 69, and I was ordained actually by Bishop O'Callaghan of long dead now, God rest him. But he had made it a mortal sin to go to a dance that didn't end at midnight. And of course, at that time, during Lent, there were no dances, and the bands used to go to England. So not only was it frowned upon, but it was looked upon very much as an occasion of sin, if not an actual sin. I never saw it that way, because I'd gone to school with Brian Call and Frankie McBride and many of the others, Pat Chesters and people like that that became the Plattermen, the Buckaroos, the Polka Dot Show Band. And I knew them very well. And in fact, I was writing for Albert Reynolds' paper, the Dancing Gazette, from 4 years before that, under an assumed name. So I was always very much part of the scene. I wasn't allowed to read papers, but I was writing for them, even though I wasn't allowed to read them while I was training for the priesthood. And so it was a very different world altogether. But I always, I never felt out of place in a dance hall. I used to, in Mount Argus, I'd get up on a little Honda 50, at about 11 o'clock. And at that stage, there were 9 ballrooms in the centre of Dublin. Now, when most of them had dancing 7 nights a week, never less than 6. And I would go round as many of them as I could in any particular night, and then start the next night and finish around the others. So by the end of the week, I would certainly have got to all 9 ballrooms at some stage every week. And you met the bands, and you became and of course, what happened then was people used to come to me and talk to me at it, and I'd be sitting there, and then they'd say, "God, I haven't been to confessions in years. Do you hear confessions here?" I'd say, "I hear confessions anywhere." And so I'd be to hear confessions and chat to people. On the one hand, we'd have a great chat about the band, and then 5 minutes later, we'd have confession, and then 5 minutes later than that, we'd have, another chat about the band. It just seemed the whole thing so natural and so right, and it taught me so much more than theology books could ever do. That's where the people were. They were genuine, decent people, a lot of them away from home, a lot of them living in flats and bed-sitters in Dublin. If they didn't make it here, the next jaunt was over to England. And so they were living on the edge all the time, and they needed encouragement, they needed hope, and gosh, they needed a night out at the dances, and they got that. And they could see that I agreed with that, and they could see that I was trying to understand where they were at. And so I became part of their life. Did many marriages of couples that I'd met in dance halls. Still go around Ireland and meet people now who are 50 years married saying, "Do you remember we used to meet you in the National or the Iron Ballroom or the Tara Club or the Crystal Ballroom or the Four Provinces or the TV Club?" All of them. And they remember me from the halls when I have long forgotten who they are.
Truly incredible, truly incredible. It's hard to believe in today's world that you could have a situation whereby dancing and things like that were completely and totally frowned upon and been treated as though they were that you were damned to hell forever should you ever stand inside one of them.
Well, I wouldn't say that they were. I wouldn't say that they ever went as far to say you were damned from going inside one of them. The problem, of course, was that it would have been great in this era because many of the priests ran halls to make money at that stage, and of course then they would go round the place with a stick, making sure that couples stayed, if not 2 meters apart, at least far enough apart so that nothing sinister could happen in it. And that was the way it was. Everything was looked upon as sinful. And I could never see that. I could never see that. And still don't see it. I mean, people being fully human and enjoying themselves in a legitimate way is a virtuous thing. It's a prayer. It's not a sin.
Indeed so, indeed so. I mean, you took a different road on everything. I mean, way back in the early 1970s, when a newspaper began to be published in Ireland called The Sunday World, you were writing for that paper back when it wasn't. It was certainly the paper wouldn't be associated with in any way religious. The article I remember you wrote was a little bit of religion.
That's right. Still writing it. I've the longest running column in Ireland for a long time. I've just completed 45 years. I'm in my 46th year writing for the Sunday World, never having missed a Sunday in 45 and a half years. And I started writing for the Sunday World a year after it was founded. And Kevin Marn, the late Kevin Marn, God be good to him, he was the editor at that stage, and he came to me, and he knew me from the dance halls. That's where he knew me. And he said, "You have to write for the Sunday World." And I said, "Kevin, God, I couldn't write for the Sunday World. I was being my little pretty priest at that stage." And we had it up and down, and then he said to me a very simple sentence. He said, "Brian," he said, I'm giving you an audience at that time at 500,000. It's double that now. I'm giving you every week an audience of 500,000, many of whom will never see the inside of a church. And you say you can't write for my paper. And he said, "What kind of a priest are you putting in your expletives in the proper places, if you wouldn't mind?" And I just looked at him and I said, "When do you want me to start writing?" Because I knew I was pinned against the wall. There was no other argument. He was right and I was utterly wrong. And for the next week I was writing for the Sunday World, and I'm still writing.
Indeed, that is absolutely fantastic. I mean, what was there must have been a sort of a dim view taken by some of the church authorities back then of you, writing this article for a paper like that.
they were sure. I was ostracised by it, and a year or two later, I became a parish priest in the diocese of Dublin. In the order, and I'd go to deanery meetings of priests, at which the main topic of conversation was, why is it that one of our parish priests is writing for a rag that should be a sin for other people to read, and he's writing for it? Me sitting there,
Right.
You would utterly ostracised. I remember going to Belfast to do a wedding of a cousin of mine, and when the priest discovered who I was, and he said, "Are you the guy that writes for that rag, The Sunday World?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Well, you'll not stand on my altar. Get out of here." And he did, and he put me out and wouldn't let me do the wedding because I had written for The Sunday World.
Wow, that is astounding. It really is absolutely astounding.
But I knew I was doing the right thing. I knew if in the years that have come since, various papers, including the large broadsheets, have asked me to write for them, and I've said no. If it means leaving the Sunday World, definitely no, I will not. Because I think that's where I should be. It's exactly as Kevin Marin said. It's read by ordinary people to whom nobody else speaks. So I'm in the privileged position to get the opportunity of speaking to such good people.
Indeed, you're truly incredible. You've on a number of occasions you've been censured by by the Catholic Church over various things, which to many ordinary people seem pretty ridiculous.
Well, yes, I suppose that's one of the difficulties of being the voice of common people. When I say common people, I don't mean common as muck people. I mean the ordinary people. I mean decent, very decent people. And I listen to them, and I find the Second Vatican Council, a way back just before I was ordained, said a very simple thing: the people, the Church is the people of God. The people. He didn't say the clergy of God, didn't say the bishops of God. He said the people of God. So I took that in a literal form, and still do to this day. And of course it has been developed ever since. And I think it's one of the greatest things that the Catholic Church particularly is actually forgetting, that the Church is not about clerics, it's not about bishops, it's not about Rome. It's about the believing people on the ground doing their best, and they are the infallible group within the Church more than anybody else. And I have to listen to that very, very carefully and learn from it and understand it and dialogue with them. And they listen to me and I listen to them. And both of us learn from one another.
Indeed so. It seems, it seems so pretty basic, just quite a simple thing that the ordinary man on the street can totally understand this. It seems incredible that the authorities, just didn't see that, and the censoring you from doing various things.
They certainly tried to do that, but I fought it and kept writing, and if they had thrown me out of the priesthood, and it came very close to that. I think if Pope Francis hadn't been elected Pope, I would have been thrown out of the priesthood. Because the previous regime was very intent on getting people like me across the world out of the Church. I don't know what sort of a church they were looking for, but it was certainly only the very Puritan people and thought could be in it. And of course, Jesus had said the very opposite. He had come to bring when he gave the Eucharist, he said, "Take this, all of you, and eat it." And when he died for all, not a privileged few. I know that when I couldn't do it otherwise, and the censorship proved that to me. If I had to make a choice between what Rome was trying to impose on me or listening to what Christ would do in the gospel, well, I had no choice. I just had to follow Christ, even if that meant being thrown out of the church. But if it had been, I wouldn't have been thrown out of the church. I probably would have been thrown out of the priesthood. But having said that, I'd go on doing the same things anyway, and I knew that. It was when I was very upset about it in the beginning, but when I thought it through, I said to myself, look, you've only a lot of years left anyway, as you say, or a few years left anyway. And so you'll go on doing the same things, listening to people, helping people, praying with people, blessing people. Nobody can stop you doing that. So, just make your mind up to do what you know to be right. That is, listen to what Jesus would do in the same circumstances.
Indeed. It sounds pretty, it sounds pretty basic, and it's, the things I know have changed from back in those heady days when you were being censured and heavily censured, which seemed, as I say, truly incredible. But one of the things that you've got is you've got a tremendous support from people.
Well, thank God, people. I mean, and it's a privilege that is, and you certainly don't take it lightly. And it makes you think before you say things. It makes you think before you judge anything. My aim is, you'll always make mistakes. Anybody will always make mistakes. I'm human, the same as everybody else. But my aim is to look at whatever is happening, and if there's a controversy, I'll say, well, is there any good in it? And then, if you can see whether good in it, well, acknowledge the goodness. And then, if you acknowledge the goodness, people are more likely to listen to you when you say, I doubt if that's right. Do you understand what I mean?
Yes.
If you acknowledge the obvious goodness in it, they'll accept you questioning something about it. But if you go in telling everybody they're wrong, even though without ever acknowledging the good, well, you shouldn't expect anybody to listen to you, because you're as wrong as they are.
Indeed so. Now, you've been you're originally from Enniskillen. You then went to Dublin. Then you were posted back, if I can put it like that, to Enniskillen, and then you were moved up to Crossgar and County Down. Now, with being from Northern Ireland, it must have been quite distressing for you in the times of the troubles and the violence and the killings and all that.
Indeed, it was, and I had three cousins who were murdered during that time, three first cousins who were murdered during that time. And it was a very difficult time for everybody, and there were atrocities on all sides. Nobody had all right on their side at that stage, and it was a very difficult thing. And in fact, one of the saddest days of my life was in 1987, when the bomb went off at the Senate Half in Enniskillen, killing 11 people that day, and one who subsequently died later, a lovely man, headmaster in the school. And there were many of them, over half of them I knew, and particularly Gordon Wilson, whom I knew very well, and his family. And I asked to be sent back to Enniskillen as soon as the next time for a change came, even though I'd been in rector and parish priest in probably what was then the best known church in Dublin, and I wanted to go back because I felt that somebody had to start a healing process after this, and somebody start bringing them together. And so, thank God, I went back there and took my time about it and listened and learned as much as I could again, and tried to do things. Went to Church of Ireland churches to preaching, and did help with. We invited other ministers into my church, and we worked together. Our church rather than mine, and we worked together. And it didn't immediately receive acclaim, because it was breaking hundreds of years of tradition. But luckily, we all understood. I didn't ask every minister, but a number of ministers who felt the same way as I did. And when somebody made the first move, it was extraordinary how it was blessed. And then very, very quickly, the people understood this. And they started going to other churches and for services when they had to, and appreciating their own church even more because of that. And strangely enough, it changed the politics of the thing from a very small, it was only meant to be two neighbouring churches doing the best they could, and it spread over, and in fact, quite ever since then. In many parishes in Fermanagh, one of the questions being asked of ministers before they're appointed is, are you willing to work with other religions and with other churches to spread the ministry? It just is a lovely, it was probably in a quiet way, it was blessed. I didn't understand what I was doing. I just tried to do what was right in my own head, and discovered that once we did that, God blessed it in ways that none of us could even imagine. So it's that old thing, if the longest journey has to begin with a single step. And that's what we have to do in life, and it's the same. I still work the same as that. You don't have to complete a journey in a day. If in your lifetime you can make one step that makes a difference, others will make the journey for you.
Indeed, how very true it is, and it was certainly something that at that time when you went to Enniskillen, it had been in a very, very dark place.
Yes, a very dark place at that time, and rightly so. And of course, subsequently, Omagh, the same thing happened on an even greater scale. The scars of those 2 days are still very prominent, and will be as long as the people who lost family members remember them. But the other thing was, and this is what I tried to point out to people, that unless we come together, then others will divide us. And I still think that's the proper principle to go. If people see a division, they'll get out the pickaxe and make it bigger. But if people see that people are divided, they won't waste their time trying to cause a division. Indeed. So we have to not only be united, we have to show unity.
Indeed. You did a very powerful film from a peace wall in Belfast back within this past couple of years.
Oh gosh, I'd nearly forgotten I'd done that. That was for the Claire Bourne show, and it was very quickly. I was working in Belfast on a Friday doing my own radio program for BBC, and I got a call from them, and they said the person who was to do something for us next Monday night has not been able to do it. I wonder, would you be able to do something about maybe the peace thing in Belfast? So they got a Belfast cameraman, and he suggested the venue. And then they said to me, just talk to camera. And literally, I had no time to prepare it. I just had to talk to camera. It proved to be, I nearly got shocked myself when I saw what I had said. But I never regretted it. But, I don't know really where it came out. If I had time to prepare it, I mightn't have said it as well, or as forcefully, or as convincingly, which was the most important thing.
Indeed so. It was a pretty powerful piece that got hugely widely shared.
Yes, and thank you. I'd nearly forgotten about it when you started the question. I wasn't sure what you're talking about. Then I do remembered it well, and it was a bleak day. It was a bleak day, and the situation was bleak at that time, and the politicians were showing absolutely no leadership at that time. They were divided and leaving a huge vacuum. And that's what I was talking about. If you leave a vacuum, violence will fill the vacuum. So that's really what I was saying to them at that stage, and to all of us. Look, we have got to come together, and nobody wants to see this peace wall. Imagine a big wall up the middle of a city where to keep people apart in this day and age. We thought walls came down when Berlin came down, but there was one sitting right in front of us in Belfast to keep neighbours apart. It's a sobering thought.
Indeed.
That people who with the same deprivation would be ready to kill each other rather than work with one another to improve their deprivation.
Indeed, and probably no two peoples in the world with more in common.
That's what I'm saying. That's exactly what I'm saying. If they were in another city in England or indeed in Dublin, they would be called a ghetto, and they would be electing members together to voice the difficulties of being forced to live in a ghetto and without prospects of either housing or education or work or a future. It's just to voting fodder for politicians who play in the division so that they can be elected, rather than looking for unity, that they might do something for and with the people.
Indeed. It's it's pretty tough. I mean, in that situation. Now, you've been based now this past number of years in Northern Ireland. I assume you're finding it today, even though there are still the peace walls. But I assume you're finding it today, a better place than it was 40 years ago.
Oh gosh, yes. I came to it in '89. I came back to it in '89. I've worked in the north ever since. I worked in Dublin from 70 to 89, and then I've worked in the north from 89 until the present day. Largely in the north, although I do a lot of work in across the entire island, actually. But so I remember writing article after article in the Sunday World: give up the violence, and look for and follow and search for your aims through the ballot box. Now we have taken that step, but we need to move on, because the ballot box is almost used as a bullet now. Do you understand what I mean? It has become such a different thing. It's a source of division, and what we got to need now is somebody with a political brain to say politics is the art of the possible, not the permanent structure of loving the impossible. So we've got to learn to see how at different age structures are falling everywhere. COVID has exaggerated that. Now we see we need each other. And when somebody goes into hospital with COVID, do you ask it as a Protestant nurse or is it a Catholic doctor? No, you don't. You're just glad to see somebody who has the strength, the courage, the hope, and the ability to help you in your moment of pain. And that's politics. That really is what politics should be about. Getting the best people to use their best attributes for the betterment of society.
Indeed so, and the betterment of their own selves as well.
Well, that's society. So who is society? Only them. That's what I mean by society. That they're the betterment of themselves, i.e., society.
Indeed so. Father Brian, listen, it's been fascinating talking to you. You've done a tremendous amount of work with so many people, and you've enriched so many people's lives over the years. And listen, keep it up. You're doing great, and it's been lovely to catch up with you again.
Well, thanks, Jerry. I never see myself as doing great, to be honest, but I thank you for saying it. But what I try to do is the best I can. And I couldn't do it if the people didn't accept me and if the people didn't work with me. And a compliment to what I do is a compliment to the people who do it with me. And that's thank God for that privilege to be allowed to do that.
Indeed, Father Brian. Listen, I wish you all the best for the new year. Stay safe, stay well, and listen. Fingers crossed, we shall have a chat in not too distant future.
Well, it'll be a pleasure to do so, as it has been tonight, Jerry. And a happy new year, not only to yourself and family, but to all your listeners and everybody at the station as well. Thank you very much.